Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. The fog rolled in thick that October evening, swallowing the harbor whole like some great gray beast. I stood on the dock, watching the last of the fishing boats disappear into that suffocating wall of mist, their lights growing dimmer until they were nothing more than dying embers in the darkness. 43 years I've been sailing these waters, and I'd never seen fog quite like this, dense as cotton, cold as a grave, and carrying with it the kind of silence that makes a man's skin crawl. My name is Captain Samuel Hartwell, and I should have known better than to take the Meridian out that night. Should have listened to the old-timers at Murphy's Tavern who crossed themselves and muttered about cursed waters when they saw me preparing for departure. But the Kellerman Shipping Company was breathing down my neck about the delayed cargo run to Boston, and 40 years of seamanship had made me arrogant. I thought I'd seen everything the Atlantic could throw at me. I was wrong. The Meridian was a sturdy cargo vessel, built in 1962 and showing her age in every creaking board and rusted fitting. She wasn't much to look at, but she'd been my home for the better part of 2 decades. I knew every sound she made, every vibration that ran through her hull when the engines turned over. That night, as I fired up her diesels and pulled away from the pier, something felt different. There was a tremor in her frame that I'd never felt before, a subtle wrongness that set my teeth on edge. My crew consisted of 5 men: Rodriguez, my first mate, a steady Mexican fellow with 20 years' experience; Tommy Brennan, the engineer, barely 25 but sharp as a tack with machinery; old Pete Morrison, our cook and general handyman, pushing 70 but tougher than leather; Jake Sullivan, a deckhand with arms like tree trunks; and Billy Chen, the youngest of us at 19, eager and green as spring grass. We'd worked together for 3 years, and I trusted each man with my life. They were good sailors, experienced and reliable. But as we pushed into that unnatural fog, I noticed they'd grown quiet, speaking only in whispers when they spoke at all. Even Rodriguez, normally full of stories and laughter, kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something to emerge from the mist behind us. "Captain," Rodriguez called from the wheelhouse door, his voice strained. "Radar's acting up, getting some strange readings." I stepped inside and looked at the scope. Instead of the clean sweep I expected, the screen was filled with scattered dots, appearing and disappearing like fireflies. "Probably interference from the fog," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew that wasn't right. Fog didn't cause radar ghosts like this. "There's something else," Rodriguez continued, his dark eyes troubled. "Radio's picking up chatter, voices talking about weather conditions, but—" He paused, adjusting the frequency. Static filled the wheelhouse, punctuated by fragments of conversation. "Storm's getting worse, need to change course. Lost visual on the lighthouse. If we don't make it back." The voices were distant, crackling with static, but there was something about them that made my blood run cold. They sounded urgent, desperate, and underneath it all was a quality I couldn't quite place, something that reminded me of old recordings, voices from another time. "Try to raise the Coast Guard," I ordered, but Rodriguez was already shaking his head. "Can't get through, Captain. Every frequency's jammed with this, whatever it is." I took the wheel and tried to focus on navigation, but the compass was spinning lazily, unable to find magnetic north. The GPS flickered between coordinates that made no sense, placing us sometimes in the middle of the Atlantic, sometimes on dry land in Kansas. Every instrument on the bridge seemed to have developed a mind of its own. "Cut the engines," I called down to Tommy in the engine room. "Let's drift until this clears up." But when the diesels wound down, the silence that followed was worse than any sound. It was complete, absolute, no lapping of waves against the hull, no creaking of rigging, no distant foghorns. Just the 6 of us breathing in the dark, surrounded by a wall of gray that seemed to press in from all sides. That's when I heard the first voice, Captain Hartwell. I spun around, expecting to see one of my crew, but the wheelhouse was empty except for Rodriguez, who was still fiddling with the radio. He looked up at me with confusion in his eyes. "You say something, Captain. Didn't you hear that? Someone called my name." Rodriguez shook his head slowly. "Wasn't me, and I didn't hear nothing, but I had heard it, a voice calling from somewhere out in the fog, clear as a bell despite the muffling mist. A voice that sounded familiar, though I couldn't place it. Captain Hartwell, permission to come aboard." There it was again, closer now, coming from the starboard side. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the deck, playing the beam across the water. The fog was so thick I could barely see the rail, but there was something out there. A shape in the mist, dark and indistinct. "Who's there?" I called. "Identify yourself." The shape moved closer, and I heard the splash of oars cutting through water. A small boat materialized from the fog, and my blood turned to ice water in my veins. The man rowing was someone I recognized, someone I'd tried very hard to forget. His name was Marcus Webb, and he'd been my first mate 15 years ago on a different ship, the cargo vessel Atlantic Pride. Marcus Webb, who had died when that ship went down in a storm off Cape Hatteras, taking 12 good men to the bottom with her. But there he was, rowing through the fog as if death was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. His face was pale as bone, his clothes dripping with seawater, and when he looked up at me, his eyes held the flat, lifeless quality of a doll's eyes. "Permission to come aboard, Captain," he repeated, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You're dead," I whispered. "You've been dead for 15 years, Marcus smiled, but it was a terrible expression, empty of warmth or humanity. "Death's just another port of call, Captain. Mind if I tie up alongside?" Before I could answer, he'd thrown a line over the rail and was climbing aboard with the fluid grace of an experienced sailor. Water ran from his clothes in steady streams, pooling on the deck at his feet, and I could smell the ocean on him, not the clean salt smell of surface water, but the deep, dark odor of the abyss. "Rodriguez," I called, backing toward the wheelhouse. "Rodriguez, get out here." But when my first mate appeared, he looked right through Marcus as if he wasn't there. "What is it, Captain? You look like you've seen a ghost," if only he knew. "Can't you see him?" I pointed at Marcus, who was now coiling the rope with practiced efficiency. "He's standing right there." Rodriguez followed my gaze, his expression growing concerned. "Captain, there's nobody there. Maybe you should sit down, get some rest." But Marcus was there, solid as life, and now he was walking toward me with that empty smile still fixed on his face. "Good to see you again, Captain." "It's been a long time. What do you want?" I managed to croak. "Same thing I always wanted," Marcus replied. "To serve under a good captain. The Atlantic Pride was a fine ship, wasn't she? Shame about that storm, the storm." I remembered it all too well, the hurricane that had come out of nowhere, catching us in the middle of the night with nowhere to run. I'd made the call to abandon ship, but we'd waited too long. The lifeboats had been swamped, and I'd watched 12 men disappear into the churning black water. I'd been the only survivor, clinging to a piece of debris until the Coast Guard found me 18 hours later. "That wasn't my fault," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. "I did everything I could. Did you?" Marcus tilted his head, water still streaming from his hair. "Or did you save yourself first and worry about the crew second?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow because there was truth in it. In those final moments when the Atlantic Pride was rolling over, I had thought of my own survival first. I'd grabbed a life vest and jumped, leaving my men to fend for themselves in the chaos. "You left us, Captain," Marcus continued, his voice still eerily calm. "Left us to die while you saved your own skin, but that's all right. We understand survival instinct is a powerful thing." I tried to help, I protested, but the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "Of course you did." Marcus's smile widened, revealing teeth stained black with seaweed. "That's why we're here. To help you, as if summoned by the word, more shapes began emerging from the fog. One by one, they climbed over the rail, 12 men in waterlogged clothes, their faces pale and lifeless, their movements unnaturally fluid. I recognized every one of them. Jimmy Kowalski, the young engineer who'd been saving money for his wedding. David Park, the quiet Korean deckhand who sent half his wages home to his family. Big Jim Murphy, the cook who made the best chowder on the eastern seaboard. All of them dead, all of them staring at me with those terrible, empty eyes. My living crew members continued their work as if nothing was happening. Rodriguez checked the instruments, Tommy worked in the engine room, and the others went about their duties, oblivious to the supernatural gathering on deck. Only I could see the dead men, only I could hear their voices. "Captain," Rodriguez called from the wheelhouse. "Fog's starting to clear a bit. Should we get underway?" I wanted to scream at him, to grab him by the shoulders and force him to see what I was seeing, but I knew it would be useless. This visitation was meant for me alone. "Captain Hartwell," said Jimmy Kowalski, water streaming from his mouth as he spoke. "Remember me? I was supposed to get married the week after we got back. Sarah waited for me at the altar, but I never came home." "I remember," I whispered. "Do you remember David?" Jimmy gestured to the Korean man, whose face was a mask of seaweed and brine. "He had 3 kids back in Seoul. They're all grown up now, never knowing what happened to their father. One by one, they told me their stories, the lives cut short, the families destroyed, the dreams that died with them in the cold Atlantic water. And through it all, Marcus Webb stood silently, watching me with those dead eyes, that terrible smile never leaving his face. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked, my voice breaking. "Nothing you haven't already given us," Marcus replied. "Your guilt, your fear, your sleepless nights. We've been feeding on them for 15 years, Captain, growing stronger with every nightmare, every moment of self-doubt. I don't understand, don't you? We're not really here, Captain. We never left the bottom of the ocean. But guilt is a powerful thing. It can reach across the veil between life and death, can give the dead a kind of life in the minds of the living. You've been carrying us with you all this time, and now we're strong enough to manifest." The fog was indeed beginning to clear, and I could see stars appearing overhead, but the dead crew of the Atlantic Pride remained as solid as ever, crowding the deck of the Meridian like a supernatural boarding party. "Captain," Rodriguez called again, "you all right out there? You've been standing at the rail for 20 minutes talking to yourself." 20 minutes, it felt like hours since Marcus had first appeared. Time seemed to be flowing differently, reality bending around the presence of the dead. "We have a proposition for you, Captain," Marcus said, stepping closer, "a way to end this. To give us the rest we deserve." "What kind of proposition?" Marcus gestured toward the water, now visible as the fog continued to dissipate. "Take the ship down, join us on the bottom. Your crew will have time to escape, they're good sailors, they'll make it to the lifeboats, but you come with us, pay the debt you've owed for 15 years. You want me to sink my own ship? It's justice, Captain, you lived when we died. You've had 15 years that should have been ours, time to balance the scales." I looked around at my living crew, going about their duties, unaware of the supernatural drama playing out around them. Good men, all of them. They didn't deserve to die because of my past sins. "If I do this," I said slowly, "you'll leave them alone, they'll be safe. We have no quarrel with them," Marcus assured me. "This is between you and us." Always has been. The fog was almost gone now, revealing a calm sea under a canopy of stars. In the distance, I could see the lights of other ships, the normal traffic of a busy shipping lane. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary, except for the 12 dead men standing on my deck waiting for my answer. "Captain," Tommy's voice echoed from the engine room, "we've got a problem down here." Water's coming in fast. I ran to the companionway and looked down to see Tommy waist-deep in seawater, struggling with the bilge pumps. But that was impossible. The Meridian was sound, her hull intact. There was no way water could be flooding in that quickly, unless the dead were making good on their threat. "Get to the lifeboats," I shouted to Rodriguez. "All hands, abandon ship." Rodriguez looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "Captain, what are you talking about? The ship's fine." But even as he spoke, the Meridian began to list to starboard. The deck tilted beneath my feet, and I heard the ominous groan of stressed metal. Somehow, impossibly, the ship was going down. "The lifeboats," I screamed again, but my crew still didn't seem to understand the urgency. They moved slowly, mechanically, as if they were sleepwalking. The dead crew of the Atlantic Pride watched with satisfaction as the Meridian settled deeper into the water. Marcus Webb nodded approvingly. "Good choice, Captain, it won't be long now." The ship was sinking fast, too fast for a normal breach. Water poured over the rails, and the deck became a chaotic maze of floating debris. I saw Rodriguez struggling with one of the lifeboats, his movements sluggish and dreamlike. Tommy emerged from the flooded engine room, gasping and confused, but they would make it. Somehow I knew they would make it. The dead had promised, and whatever else they were, they kept their word. As for me, I felt a strange sense of peace as the water rose around my ankles. The guilt that had eaten at me for 15 years was finally lifting, replaced by a kind of resigned acceptance. I had run from this moment for too long. The Meridian gave a final shudder and slipped beneath the waves, taking me with her. The last thing I saw was the concerned faces of my crew, safe in their lifeboats, calling my name across the dark water. But I was already gone, following Marcus Webb and the others down into the depths, finally paying the debt I'd owed since that terrible night 15 years ago. The ocean closed over my head like a cold, dark blanket, and I felt the weight of the water pressing down, carrying me toward the bottom where the Atlantic Pride waited, her hull broken and her holds full of shadows. I was going home at last. 3 days later, the Coast Guard found the survivors of the Meridian floating in their lifeboats, all 5 men alive but traumatized. They told a confused story about their captain talking to empty air, then suddenly ordering them to abandon ship just before she went down. They said Captain Samuel Hartwell had stayed behind, going down with his vessel like the old-time sailors used to do. The official report blamed a catastrophic hull failure, though investigators could never explain how a sound ship could sink so quickly in calm seas. The survivors were treated for exposure and released, but none of them ever sailed again. They all claimed the same thing, that in their final glimpse of the sinking Meridian, they had seen figures on the deck, shadowy forms that shouldn't have been there. But the ocean keeps its secrets, and the dead keep their promises. Captain Samuel Hartwell had finally joined his crew, and the waters off Cape Hatteras were a little quieter, a little more peaceful. The debt was paid in full.